Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there. Today we're talking about Week 11 quarterbacks that we're going to start and sit here for fantasy football, or as I like to call it, which stud will suck this week. Because it seems like every single week there's some stud guys out there that have a smash start in front of them, and then they struggle. Lamar Jackson. That's kind of, I mean, we're kind of sick of it, but it's a part of the game, so we got to go through every player, every matchup, every week right here to see if we can figure out which quarterbacks we want to hang with in Week 11. Before we get into Week 11, though, how do we do in Week 10? And I'll sum up Week 10 like this. It was okay. I wasn't exactly pleased, but like I said, there was a few guys that just struggled that we did not anticipate. Out of the 29 quarterbacks we gave a start or sit designation to, 19 were correct for an accuracy percentage of 66%. I mentioned Lamar Jackson, he struggled. Mac Jones was a miss because he came out and balled out. Carson Wentz struggled. Some of the hits, Ryan Tannehill. A lot of people wanted to hop off the bandwagon of Ryan Tannehill. That rushing upside really helps him. Derek Carr. And then I put Patrick Mahomes. I know it's kind of cheesy, but I had comments last week of people saying that they were frustrated and that they were benching Patrick Mahomes. I hope you didn't bench him because Vintage Patrick came back, and can he do it again here this week in Week 11? But before we get into all these matchups, just a quick reminder, I want to give you $500 cash here for this holiday season. How do you enter into that giveaway? It's super simple. Head over to prizepicks.com or download the app, create a new account, use the referral code HEADLINERS. You make your initial $20 deposit, we'll match your deposit all the way up to $100, and then you're entered in to win $500 cash here. We'll announce the winner end of the month. Looking forward to doing that. But let's head into Thursday Night Football now with a matchup between the New England Patriots and Atlanta Falcons. And that's where we find Mac Jones, New England Patriots, who just went out in Week 10 and basically went full-blown Conor McGregor cockwalk on all of us because he went out and threw for a season-high 3 passing touchdowns against the Cleveland Browns. But a lot of that has to do with the protection he's seen there in the pocket. He hasn't been sacked more than twice in a game since Week 4. The bigger issue here, though, is that New England isn't a pass-heavy offense anymore, right? They are a run-first team. They're going to pound it on the ground. He hasn't had 40 pass attempts in a ball game since Week 4. Now, he can go out there and he can play well, but the style of play that he brings to the table, if he doesn't throw for 2 touchdowns a game, more than likely, you're not seeing that 18 fantasy points, and that's something he hasn't done a whole lot of, right? He's only done it once out of the last 3 games played. Now, a matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, they level around 19 fantasy points per game. But the issue I see here is New England getting a lead again and focusing more on the run in the second half. I'm going to sit Big Mac Jones here this weekend for Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons. The potential loss of Cordero Patterson really hurts Matt Ryan, and we started to see that a little bit last week. Patterson was one of the biggest reasons why Matt Ryan has been a stable fantasy starter for majority of the season. They have no running game that's anything to speak of anyway. He's inconsistent in the passing game, and he's losing all of his best weapons. New England allows right around 17 fantasy points per game, 3rd fewest in the NFL. Things are just not lining up for Matt Ryan to be a safer start for me here this week, so he's going to remain in the sit column, but I'm also going to head over to Prize Picks and smash the under that's currently set at 248.5 when it comes to passing yards. I think the New England Patriots can handle the Atlanta Falcons this weekend and really control time and possession on the ground, so I'm going to sit Matt Ryan. But just like we do in all my videos, it's time to thrust it over to Sunday football because that's what we're looking for here. The Indianapolis Colts and Buffalo Bills, and Carson Wentz coming off his worst game of the year against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who just seem to be playing pretty good football here as of late. The running game, though, has really shouldered the load in Indianapolis, and it carries them to a win, right? Jonathan Taylor out there putting the team on his back and running the entire length of the field with them. Week 10 was the first week that we've had Carson Wentz go out there and not have at least 2 touchdowns since Week 3. The guy has been super consistent majority of the season, but now he gets a matchup against Buffalo, who is ranked number 1 in the NFL against opposing quarterbacks, allowing only 13.5 fantasy points per game. Now, we know the potential is there. We know the big play opportunity is there, but we also know there's a lot of risk here this week as well. He's really a fringe start for me. I went back and forth on Carson Wentz a lot this weekend because he's really somebody that I can see scoring 18 points, but it's going to be an uphill battle for sure. I prefer to sit him here this week, though, as of right now, for a few safer options that we'll talk about later in the show. As for Josh Allen, we know you start Josh Allen every single week. He's currently the quarterback 2 overall in fantasy football. It's way easier to throw on Indianapolis than it is to run on them. Not like they're going to run a whole lot in Buffalo anyway. Plus, Josh Allen and the rushing upside for himself is always there. The ceiling is ginormous. The guy can go out and throw for 400 yards a week. He's definitely going to remain in the start column here in week 11. Now we head to Chicago for the Bears and the Ravens, and what a letdown week 10 was for all Lamar Jackson owners, right? I mean, because everyone was expecting to have the Miami Dolphins come out there and play like that last week. Said no one ever. But now he gets the Chicago Bears, who allow right around 19 fantasy points per game. But this team, in my opinion, really needs to utilize a little bit more Rashad Bateman in the passing game. This guy is a bona fide stud that needs more targets. He just makes plays happen. This is arguably the best overall weapons that Lamar Jackson has probably ever had at his disposal, but they're kind of letting him down at times. As of right now, his receivers have dropped a total of 17 passes. That's 11th most in the NFL. Now, obviously, you never sit Lamar Jackson. We're kind of hoping for a bounce back here this week, and he's obviously going to be a start. For Chicago, you got Justin Fields. They're coming off of the bye week, but we're super reliant on the rushing upside of Justin Fields more so than the passing game from what we've seen so far this season. Kind of like Jalen Hurts on a weekly basis. But Justin Fields has yet to throw for 300 yards in a game. He's yet to throw for multiple touchdowns in a game. A matchup this week going up against the Baltimore Ravens, who allow right around 18.5 fantasy points. I just need more consistency out of Justin Fields to throw him into my lineup. I think the ceiling could be absolutely huge, but until they start really utilizing Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson, especially in this offense, it's going to be an uphill battle for him to go out there and get that 18 fantasy points a week that we need, kind of as a baseline. So as of right now, Justin Fields remaining a sit. Out to Cleveland now for the Browns and the Lions, and who's excited for this quarterback matchup? This is like my reversed Manscaped matchup of the week, because this is not a great matchup whatsoever here this week. You got Jared Goff, who on one side has only thrown for 1 touchdown over his last 5 games. I had to go double check it. I literally recorded this, stopped it, went back, pulled up the stats again. I'm like, I had to miswrite this. Nope. It's true. He's only thrown for 1 touchdown over his last 5 games, and there's no way that sounds super sexy to you. So he's obviously going to be a sit. The ceiling is like on top. He's having to duck because the ceiling is so low. Then for the Cleveland Browns, you got Baker Mayfield, who you know out there that I like me some Bake Show. I'm a fan overall of Baker Mayfield. But he's day-to-day with a knee injury, and how limited is he going to be? Some of his ability to move and scramble around the pocket, to extend plays, to make things happen, that's what he really relies upon. And if he doesn't have that mobility, we could be in for a very long day here as well. He's only had 21 pass attempts now in back-to-back games, 3 touchdowns total over the last 3 weeks. Another one of these guys whose ceiling's just kind of low. They're a run-first offense. We know that we're going to see a lot of running on the side of Detroit as well, maybe with some DeAndre Swift. This could be a low-scoring game, and when they're running so much at the time of possession, the actual possessions that each team is getting maybe on the lower side, and we don't see too many points, which doesn't lead to a whole lot of fantasy points. So Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, pass. Now we go to Tennessee for the Titans and Texans, and I've said this for weeks, and I'm going to continue to say it here once again. Ryan Tannehill remains fantasy viable because of the rushing upside. The guy likes to call his own number around the goal line, and us as fantasy players absolutely love it. He has now scored a rushing touchdown in 4 out of his last 5 games played. Now, the passing production over the last few weeks has been down overall, right? We know there's no Julio Jones. A.J. Brown kind of been inconsistent at times, but it could be different here this week in a matchup going up against the Houston Texans, who allowed 21 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's 5th most in the NFL. The ceiling may not be what it once was, but the floor is still super safe. I mean, he's going to go out there, he's going to get a baseline of 15 points and have that upside right around 20 to 25. He's going to remain a start for me here this week, but he's not going to be super high in the rankings. As for Tyrod Taylor and the Houston Texans, I love the potential of Tyrod in the offense, but I can't trust it. Can you trust? I mean, he came back in week 9 before their bye week, didn't throw any touchdowns, but he sure threw 3 interceptions and was sacked 5 times. This isn't a bad matchup for him going up against the Tennessee Titans, but the ceiling just too low, too inconsistent, not enough weapons out there at his disposal to go out there and have a great fantasy day where we can, throw into our lineup and really feel okay about it. I don't have that warm fuzzy, so Tyrod Taylor, he's remaining a sit. Up to Minnesota now for the Packers and Vikings, and Kirk Cousins just continues to do what Kirk Cousins does. he throws touchdowns. He's had at least 2 passing touchdowns in 6 of the 9 games he's played so far this season and hasn't had an interception since week 5. Now, the Green Bay defense, they're playing pretty good right now, allowing only 14 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, which is second fewest in the NFL. But with the likes of Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook, it's a big play waiting to happen, and it really keeps that floor safe for Kirk Cousins on a weekly basis. Another one of those opportunities where he may not see a huge game, right? They're going to limit that upside a little bit, but we're going to continue to start Kirk Cousins. As for Aaron and the Green Bay Packers, he's coming off of a down week, right? Came off the COVID IR last week, had no touchdowns against the Seattle Seahawks. First game with no touchdowns since the first week of the season. Now a matchup going up against the Minnesota Vikings. They allow around 18 fantasy points per game. Aaron Rodgers still somebody who's going to bounce back, have a better week. He's going to put up some big numbers here, end of season. So yeah, he's going to remain a start for me here this week. Now we check out the Dolphins and the Jets, and it sounds like we're back on Tua time in Miami. He came off the bench last week, even with a broken finger, and led the team to victory in Week 10 against the Baltimore Ravens. And this is a much better matchup for him, right? Going up against the Jets, they allow right around 19 fantasy points per game, and he has weapons around him. Not sexy weapons, not weapons that you're like, hell yeah, because it's like Mac Hollins and Albert Wilson, but he's still got plenty of opportunities to go out there and put up some solid numbers. Plus, the running game continues to struggle. Now, he performed well before his injury. If you forgot, right before he got hurt, Tua was out there putting up some numbers, even had a QB1 overall week. So he's going to be a start for me here this week against the Jets. As for the Jets, well, this just happened, right? I mean, because I was going into this analysis like, okay, well, who's it going to be, Mike White or Zach Wilson? Are they going to go back to Zach Wilson? Do they give Mike White another chance after sucking balls last week? And then it comes out that they're going to start Joe Flacco. I had to immediately look at a calendar because I thought it was 2015 all over again, because Joe Flacco is just not the answer to anyone's questions. Now, can he go out there and put up some solid numbers? Probably. Is he somebody that you're super excited to start in fantasy football? No, you're not, because it's the Jets still. And Joe Flacco hasn't been a thing since, I don't remember. What's scary here is when I think of Joe Flacco, I know the guy's had some good years in Baltimore, but I remember that time where he slid and got like knocked out and he was like calling for his cab or something as he was laying on. I mean, that's not what the thought that you want to have about your starting quarterback. It's just an overall team that struggles. He has weapons. How do they utilize Elijah Moore with him? And I don't know. It's just not sexy. It's not something I'm going to take the risk on here in Week 11. Up to Philly now for the Eagles and the Saints. And are we getting closer to seeing more and more Taysom Hill? Potentially. I mean, they've lost back-to-back games now under Trevor Siemian, and the snap percentage for Taysom Hill has increased over 9% between the last 2 weeks. Plus, we know that rushing upside is there, and he can score points quicker on the ground than Siemian can through the air. Now, Trevor Siemian, though, he hasn't been bad. He was the quarterback 4 overall in fantasy just last week. Philadelphia, they allowed just under 19 fantasy points per game, and in my opinion, Siemian still gives them the best chance to win the ballgame. I think we're still going to remain somewhat of a split here at times. We'll start to see Taysom Hill sprinkled in a little bit more, but what we really need here are some touchdowns. This is an offense that doesn't score a whole lot of touchdowns through the air, and if they can find some of them here this week against Philadelphia, it's really going to help the floor of one Trevor Siemian. I'm going to start Siemian here this week, but he's going to be another one of those guys who's going to be a little bit lower in my rankings. As for Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, we know we start Jalen Hurts every single week. He now has at least 10 rush attempts in 4 out of his last 5 games played. However, he hasn't exceeded 23 pass attempts in a game over the last 3 weeks. It's led to 3 straight games with 64% completion percentage, though. So what that tells me is he's going to be a little bit more efficient. He's doing more with less. They're asking him to do less, and it's really benefiting his overall game, which is a plus. And it's really starting to help out that chemistry and that connection between him and Devontae Smith. So that's really helping boost his ceiling every single week, because we know the floor is safe due to the rushing upside. So Jalen Hurts, once again, in the start column. Now we go over to Carolina for the Panthers and the football team of Washington, and he's back, right? Cam Newton back in Carolina, and this is almost storybook-esque. Right now, we don't know for sure if he's going to start. It has not been made official yet that he is the starting quarterback. With the amount of money they're paying him, though, I have to think that it's going to happen here this week. But before I start to talk about this game anymore, I got to preface something. Yes, I like Cam Newton. I think the NFL is better when Cam Newton is playing well. Do I want to go out there and say that Cam Newton is going to lead this team to the playoffs and be an end-of-the-season MVP and we're going to see him return to form? No, I'm not like blowing this out of proportion. I'm looking at this at just this week, and honestly, things are lining up for this to be a pretty good week for Cam Newton. We saw him barely play last week and get 2 touchdowns. Now he's in line to start at home in Carolina against his former coach, Ron Rivera, who now coaches the Washington football team. I mean, you can't write it any better. This is arguably the best weapons that Cam has ever had as a whole in his career. Plus, what we really saw last week, right? The rushing upside, the calling his own number, the goal line carries, the rushing touchdowns, the first downs. That's what Cam Newton is really going to help you with on a weekly basis here, as long as he starts. Plus, like I mentioned earlier, when things are going well, Cam kind of steps up, right? When things are bad, Cam kind of disappears and kind of pouts at times. But right now, things are looking pretty good for the Carolina Panthers, and if they can gain any momentum, any more than what they did last week in Arizona, they could play with some confidence. And Cam Newton with confidence is a lot better than an unconfident Cam Newton here. Plus, the adrenaline's going to be going. It's definitely a gamble. 100% a gamble, and we really still don't know for sure if he starts. Do we still see some PJ Walker? But what we also do know is there's no Chase Young, there's no Montez Sweat on the pass rush for the Washington football team, who allow over 26 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's the most in the NFL. Honestly, it is a gamble. Maybe you don't want to take this risk, but honestly, with the rushing upside, I'll start Cam Newton here this week if they name him the starter. As for Washington, y'all know I like me some Taylor Heinicke. I'm a fan of the Heinicke, but he hasn't thrown for multiple touchdowns in a game since week 4. Carolina, the defense is playing really well. They're starting to click there on defense. They have momentum as of right now. They're top 5 in the NFL against opposing quarterbacks. In my opinion, just too risky of a start to go out there and rely on Taylor Heinicke. I know you can be sitting there saying, Jake, you don't think it's risky to start Cam Newton, but you think it's risky to start Taylor Heinicke. I know. It sounds crazy. But I think this is just going to be one of those emotional games that can kind of get a little bit out of whack here. And I don't know if I want to risk it with Taylor Heinicke. Down to Florida now for the Jags and the Niners, and it's pretty simple here. When George Kittle is healthy, Jimmy G is a viable fantasy starting quarterback, especially with the way that Deebo Samuel is playing. Dude out there just running all over the league every single week. Plus, we're starting to see some Brandon Ayuk sightings. That helps raise the ceiling a little bit. But now a matchup going up against the Jags D, which has actually played pretty well here as of late. They're allowing right now 17.8 fantasy points per game, 9th fewest in the NFL, and they're getting better every single week. They kind of limited Josh Allen and Carson Wentz over the last couple weeks. But the way that Kyle Shanahan coaches, he's very creative, and Kittle, like I said, is the key piece here for Jimmy G, and he's going to remain a start. As for Trevor Lawrence, though, yet another game for Trevor Lawrence with no touchdowns. He now has 5 passing touchdowns since September 13th. Let that sink in a little bit. It's almost Thanksgiving, y'all. The 49ers defense is looking good as well. They've really confused Stafford just this past week. And do I think they could do the same to Trevor Lawrence, a rookie? Yeah, absolutely. The ceiling's just way too low. There's no consistency, not a lot of scoring opportunities. I'm actually going to sit Trevor Lawrence and head over to Prize Picks and smash the under, because right now, currently set at 220.5 passing yards, and I don't think he hits it here this week. Cross country now over to Las Vegas for the Raiders and the Cincinnati Bengals, and Joe Burrow coming off the bye week, and he's kind of looking to forget week 9, right? A great chance to bounce back for him here, though. This week, Las Vegas allows right around 20 fantasy points per game, 8th most in the NFL. And prior to week 9, Joe Burrow had 3 straight games with at least 250 yards passing and 3 touchdowns in each game. With Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, the ceiling every single week is huge. Plus, he's been completing right around 68% of his passes with 20 touchdowns on the season. I'm definitely going to start Joe Burrow off the bye here this week. But the same can kind of be said for Derek Carr. Another week this past week with 2 passing touchdowns. Cincinnati allows right around 18 fantasy points per game, and Carr himself is averaging right around 18 fantasy points per game, so it's a match made in heaven. Now, Cincinnati, we know we just talked about, can score points. Carr going to have to keep pace and continue to throw the ball as well. Plus, they really need to get Darren Waller going down the stretch here. He's really the key factor to raising the ceiling weekly for Derek Carr. Had somebody say they don't know how to utilize Darren Waller in Las Vegas. They've utilized him for years, so they do. They just really need to find a way, more creative ways to get him the football, since defenses are keen in on him. But as of right now, Derek Carr, he's remaining a start. Out to Arrowhead now for the Kansas City Chiefs, Dallas Cowboys, my Manscaped matchup of the week. That's right, don't forget, as soon as this show is over, head over to manscaped.com. Get yourself something nice for the holidays, not just ball trimmers. They got shampoo, they got body wash, they got straight razors, they got crop preserver, they got ball toner. They got everything you need, fellas, for your travel bag or just something for the bathroom at home. So head over to manscaped.com, use the promo code HEADLINERS, receive 20% off your order and free shipping. But now it's a matchup of Dak Prescott and Patrick Mahomes. And these are a couple of no-brainers here every single week, right? It was good to see Mahomes bounce back and really go off again just this past week. Finally had over 2 touchdowns in a game for the first time since week 4. Also his first game over 300 yards passing in a month. So that was definitely a sight for sore eyes. Hope you didn't get cute and bench him last week, even though I'm sure there's a few people that did. He now gets Dallas, who allows right around 18 fantasy points per game, and you're always going to start Patrick Mahomes. Same can kind of be said for Dak Prescott as well. You can't ever sit this guy. He's had at least 3 touchdowns in a game in 6 out of the 8 games he's played this season. And if the Kansas City offense is really back and they're clicking on all cylinders, Dak's going to have to keep his foot on the pedal and continue to throw for all 4 quarters, making that ceiling a little bit higher and remaining in the start column. Now we go up to Seattle for the Seahawks and the Cardinals, and the biggest question mark here is Kyler Murray. Are we heading for another game time decision week here in Arizona? I really think that we are, and that makes it pretty difficult to try to figure out. You want to make sure that if you have Kyler Murray, you have another option as well, because we also don't know the availability of one DeAndre Hopkins. If Murray plays, does he have his top offensive weapon? Something we're paying close attention to here, but make sure you have other options just in case, because he isn't some fringe play, right? You know that if Kyler Murray is healthy and playing, he's your starting quarterback in fantasy football. It's not like we're going to get too cute with somebody with that type of a ceiling, but if he doesn't play, we're not going to get crazy and start anybody else there in Arizona. As for Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks, he didn't come out and cook in week 10, did he? I mean, give credit to Green Bay, though. Give credit to that defense in Green Bay, but this is no easy matchup for him as well. Arizona allows only 15 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, 4th fewest in the NFL. Wilson isn't a quarterback that you can really afford to sit, though, right? With DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, the big plays that they can put up in a very short amount of time really raise that ceiling for Russ, and we've seen him put up some huge numbers in the past against these Arizona Cardinals. Seattle really needs to start winning games, like right away. And even though Pete Carroll's coming out saying he wants to run the football more, Pete, if you can't run it, you got to throw it to the big guys like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and you got the quarterback to do it. So this week, we're going to let Russ cook and remain in the start column. All right, it's time for Sunday Night Football. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Los Angeles Chargers. And at this time, the Steelers are going forward as if they're planning to play Mason Rudolph here this week. Us, as fantasy players, are not planning to play Mason Rudolph this week or ever. Why? It's Mason Rudolph, and the guy just isn't that good. Plus, this matchup is not ideal. Even without Bosa potentially there for the Chargers, this is not something that I'm considering. I mean, are you considering starting Mason Rudolph? Please tell me you're not considering starting Mason. I mean, we haven't seen much of anything from this guy for years when he's had to come in for Ben Roethlisberger. I'm not tempting fate here once again. As for Justin Herbert, though, he's a lot harder to sit. Now, he had a down week in week 10, but he still finished as quarterback 7 overall. He's thrown for 2+ touchdowns in a game, 5 out of the last 7 that he's played. Now, sure, this is not an ideal matchup for him either, going up against Pittsburgh, who has right on 16 fantasy points per game, the 7th fewest in the NFL. What we really need here is more Mike Williams. It's like we need more cowbell. We need more Mike Williams as well to really raise that ceiling back up. Now, Justin Herbert's going to remain a start, obviously, but he is dropping in the rankings. He's not somebody whose ceiling is high enough every single week to warrant that top 5 ranking on a weekly basis. So he is going to be dropped down here just a little bit more. Now, I do expect him to have, some scoring opportunities against a Mason Rudolph-led Steelers team, so that's why he's going to remain as a start. Then we rounded out Monday Night Football, the New York Giants, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and did what happened to the Chiefs and their offense, is it contagious? Did the Buccaneers catch it? Because right now, they're caught up in some offensive issues in Tampa Bay. Now, back-to-back losses is not something you expect by a Tom Brady-led team, especially with all that talent. But they were on the road there the last few weeks, and they rebound at home this week against the Giants because Tom Brady's still out there scoring fantasy points. They're just not putting up huge numbers. The Giants allow right around 18.5 fantasy points per game, and a primetime game with Tom Brady coming off a couple losses at home lines up for him to once again be a start. As for Daniel Jones and the New York Giants, they're coming off their bye week. He could have some healthier weapons. Could he get back Saquon Barkley this week? Because that would definitely help out. You just can't trust it, though, because the guy only has 4 touchdowns over his last 5 games played. That is not something that you look at and be like, ceiling's pretty good. Floor's pretty safe, because no, it's not. He hasn't thrown for over 300 yards in the game since week 4 as well. The rushing upside that we saw earlier in the season and last season is not there. I mean, he's only got 4 fantasy points combined for all rushing stats over the last 5 games. I can't rely on the rushing upside. The touchdowns through the air are not there. He's going to remain a sit for me here on Monday Night Football. All right, those are my starts and sits though for the quarterback position here, Week 11 fantasy football. Hope I was able to shed a little bit of light on some of your players on your roster. Remember, that is the purpose of this show. It's not to just sit here and say, oh yeah, you start all the best guys and you sit all the worst guys. It's so that no matter who you have on your team, you can hear a take for your player, and that you're not watching some video and not even hearing about anybody on your roster. That's the purpose of this video, and we love doing these every single week. But hopefully you guys are having a great rest of your week. Get in on the Prize Picks giveaway, right? Hit that link down below in the description. Get signed up now and use that promo code Headliners, because we're picking a winner for $500 in like a week and a half. Super pumped to give that away. So hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, a great week, and we'll talk to you later.
Headliner Nation.
I'm a headliner.